Kuzuzangpo and a very warm welcome to BBS. My name is Sonam Rinchen. In today's program, we will bring you a discussion on the Dzongkha skill testing system, which was recently developed by the Dzongkha Development Commission. And to discuss on this, I'm joined by Dr. Karma Phuntsho. Doctor is a researcher, advisor, and a consultant. And next to doctor, I'm joined by Sir Karma Gyaltsen, a project manager from Dzongkha Development Commission. I would like to thank both the panelists for joining on our program. If I might kick start with Doctor. Doctor, if you could tell us the reason for having Dzongkha skill testing system or the Dzongju.
Dzongkha standard testing system. In Dzongkha, it's Dzongkha Shese Takship Chunju. In short, Dzongju. So why do we have Dzongkha Standard Testing System or DSTS? This is an initiative of the Dzongkha Development Commission. Now, if you look at Dzongkha, we have adopted Dzongkha as a national language through successive royal commands, many policies. It's even part of the constitution that Dzongkha should be promoted as the national language of Bhutan. For a national language to progress, to grow and develop, we need so many things. We need curriculum in Dzongkha for the education system. Then we need also reference works for children to read, as learning aid. One of the things that you need also, especially when you want to have a language as a national medium, as a lingua franca, you need a standardized testing system. So you know how different courses, different programs for learning Dzongkha are actually comparing to each other. You need to find a sort of uniform standard system through which you can assess the skills, the language skills of the Bhutanese. So this was primarily initiated by Dzongkha Development Commission because at the moment, we don't quite know what the standard of Dzongkha is in Bhutan. We need to have a baseline to begin with. So through this standard testing system, we hope that we will be able to come up with a baseline and then set targets for the future on how much we should improve in successive planning and programs. So I would say DSTS or Dzongkha Standard Testing System is very important if Dzongkha has to develop and get stronger as the national language of Bhutan.
Thank you, Dr. Kamsan. If you could tell us the objectives of Dzongkha Standard Testing System.
Good example to all the viewers and thank you BVS for giving us this opportunity to talk about the objectives, the rationale of why you are coming up with the Dzongkha Standard Testing System. There are several objectives why we are coming up with the Dzongkha Standard Testing System. Firstly, to fulfill the successive royal degrees that we have received, particularly pertaining to our national language. And also, if we look at the constitution, there are 4 different clauses in 4 different articles. And the article 1 of the clause 8 says that Dzongkha is our national language. So we feel that it is our mandate, it is our responsibility as a parent agency to come up with different strategies, different resources, different literatures to promote and preserve our national language. And then we delved further and then found out that one of the best ways to promote and preserve any language is to have a testing mechanism where it will be very standardized, and also have a credible that everybody can see the competency and proficiency of a person in that particular language. So therefore, we felt that this is the right time for us to come up with this. And also, we have also found that there are different modes of examination pertaining to assessing national language Dzongkha. So that is also having duplication of resources, human resources, even financially. So we thought we will come up with the one common system where everybody can use and then ultimately promote and preserve our language.
Kamsa, I would like to ask you, and how different is DSTS or the Zongju with regard to international English learning testing system?
Well, there is not much difference, I would say, from one perspective. Primarily, when we assess the language, like any language, there are basically 4 essential skills, that is reading, writing, speaking and listening. So even in Dzongkha, it entails all the 4 skills, the primary skills. However, we have also found that we have studied the entire IELTS system and then found that that is basically for the non-native native speakers. So therefore our way of judging is slightly different. We have tried to incorporate the features that our national language Dzongkha has, which perhaps English doesn't have. So therefore it's a little different from what English, international English language testing system.
Dr. Was there any consultation carried out before formulating the system or before drafting the module?
So I was leading this project for Dzongkha Development Commission as a consultant, as you referred to earlier. So, and what we did right from the beginning is we first studied all the existing systems. So when you look at, of course, international language testing systems, there are so many, we wouldn't be able to cover even a quarter of it. But we focused on the very popular ones like TOEFL and also IELTS, English, International English Language Testing System, which is very common here in Bhutan. So we looked at some international systems. Then we basically use the strengths of these systems, and the most prominent, of course, as Karma mentioned earlier, is the International English Language Testing System. And then we also use the Common European Framework for Reference of Languages. So getting these inputs from the international systems, we also then looked at the local testing systems. We have the RCC exams, which conduct Dzongkha exams. We have the REC, Royal Education Council, which has Dzongkha standard grading systems for the schools. We also have the Election Commission that does a functional literacy test for the local government officials. So we looked at these various local Dzongkha language testing systems. And we tried to get the merits of all these, but the most appropriate that we found to model ourselves on is IELTS, because it tests the 4 primary skills associated with the language. So we did a lot of consultation, and we invited representatives from these different sectors and offices to come and present, and they took part in formulating this whole process.
Kanosala, who all will have to sit for the test?
Before I jump on the stakeholders or the participants who have to appear, the DSTS, let me also talk about a little bit on the consultation part. We have, as Dr. mentioned, we have studied the best practices both at the international level as well as the local, that is in our context. Further, we have invited all the stakeholders, and then they did the presentation. We have studied their system, and we will also take this further, because we feel that in order to really institutionalize a particular system, there should be, we have to have so many consultations. We have to see how the system really works. So we will take that for the session. When it comes to the participation, we feel that every Bhutanese can opt and see his or her competence in DS, and appear DSTs by and see your competency. But most importantly, we feel that DSTS should be used where there is any entry exams. For instance, Royal Civil Service examination. Presently, there is preliminary examination where Dzongkha is also tested. Then we have, even in the main exam there is Dzongkha paper. So we are thinking of streamlining whether this can really work or not. Then for the Election Commission of Bhutan, they are also testing the proficiency and the skills of the aspiring local leaders. So we are also thinking in that line, and even different institutions wherever there is, like I said, entry examination can use this system. So now when we talk about using this DSTs as entry examination, many Bhutanese are having the misconception that now this is only judging Dzongkha.
Yes.
But I would say that competency in a particular language will also largely showcase or reflect your competency, how proficient, how effective you are. So therefore, even when we look at the types of questions that we develop, there are so many things like analytical power, how you can negotiate, so many things. I think that's why, while it is the primary purpose is to judge your competency in a language, it goes further than that, Shuni.
Yes.
Dr. might elaborate.
So far with regard to consultation is, in addition to the institutions and the testing systems, we have also consulted Dzongkha experts.
Yes.
So I, for instance, I'm not a Dzongkha expert.
Yes.
I come to work here to lead this project because of my research background and international exposure. But we consulted the Dzongkha experts from a wide range of areas. And we got their feedback and their input to make this system as broad and as general as possible. So when this is applied, it should apply across the spectrum. So it can be implemented in the school system, it can be implemented in the civil service system, in the election system. Basically, if you look at IELTS, it is a very broad, open one. There are, of course, two streams there, but on the whole, it's very wide. In the same way, we hope DSTS will also be applicable to college entries, to parliamentary election entrances, to civil service entries. I think it can be used in so many ways, and this is one opportunity where we can consolidate the many different systems and programs we have right now under different agencies and institutions.
Yes.
So on the whole, I would say this can be applied to anyone in Bhutan. You don't need to have a minimum requirement of Dzongkha to sit the test. You may score very low if you have very sort of bare minimum. You may score very high if you are a very advanced Dzongkha professional. So it's a very, very open system. And anyone, I think even in media houses, it would be good to have this DSTS implemented.
Yes. Karma sir, I would like to ask one particular question to you, but if a doctor can supplement. DDC made several attempts to promote the national language, and the latest initiative is the Dzongkha standard testing skills. Now, how will a testing system help promote the language?
I think this is a very important aspect of language. When we talk about the facilities, the services that we provide, yes, we are providing lots of, investing lots of resources. For instance, publication of books, dictionaries, mobile apps. We are also trying to ICTize our national language, because in the modern era it's very important. However, we have observed that in spite of all these efforts, the usage of Dzongkha is very minimum as per our survey. And that primarily we feel that is because the utility of language Dzongkha is very low. If you look at the government offices, most of the organizations, ministries, they carry out their day-to-day work, official work in English. And that's why there is no utility for Dzongkha. And then because of that, only those people who are proficient in Dzongkha are using our resources. And therefore, we have also found that in the literatures, it says that for any particular language to survive and thrive, that language has to have a commercial value, meaning there should be opportunities like job opportunities, so on and so forth. And therefore, if we keep this as an entry point, definitely people will invest their time in learning Dzongkha. And as much as it is important to have other resources like books, publication of books, it is important that we have to have a testing mechanism. And especially if it is there, then people will show interest. So unless we invest our time in reading, writing and speaking, there is no way we can make ourselves command of a language. Even in English, I believe unless you read a lot, unless you write, there is no way we can make ourselves proficient in English. So therefore, in order to do that, in order for people to exhibit their interest in Dzongkha, we have to have a place for them to use it. So therefore, we feel that this is a very, it is an introvert policy where we try to institutionalize this system so that other resources can also be fully utilized by the general public.
Yes. Yeah, if I may add to this, I think there is a misconception that Dzongkha has not been doing well in the past decades. I would personally say, as I'm a student of Dzongkha, I would personally say that Dzongkha has made immense improvements and developments, immense progress. I didn't grow up going to school learning Dzongkha. In my days, the textbooks were still in classical Dzongkha, or Chökye, as we call it. But if you look at the situation of Dzongkha today, part thanks to the works of DDC, making lots of resources available, part also because state institutions like the judiciary adopted Dzongkha, both in spoken and written form. The legislative body adopted Dzongkha as the main medium. We have many institutions which also play, and the media, which played very important role in promoting Dzongkha. So today you go around Bhutan, most people will understand and speak Dzongkha, basic Dzongkha at least. And most educated people also know how to write fairly good Dzongkha. Not as good as we wish, but fairly good Dzongkha. The main challenge, the main reason for our misconception is Dzongkha is a new written language. It has existed as a written language only for about 5 decades. And we cannot hope to have a fully developed, a very rich written language in few decades, unless we, of course, put in a lot of resources and effort. And then, in addition to that, as we started to promote Dzongkha as a national language, the world started to globalize. English, for instance, has become the international language. There was so much pressure from outside and within the country that Dzongkha had to face. So it's because of globalization, because of the internationalization of English, that it seems Dzongkha has not developed. But in reality, Dzongkha has developed quite a lot if you compare the status of Dzongkha in 1950s and 60s to today. And this is how it should go. We should keep pushing forward to make Dzongkha stronger, richer, more common as the national idiom.
Doctor, I'd like to seek your view as a researcher, doctor. General perception is that Dzongkha is a difficult language and there is more confusion created than clarity. If your views.
So there's some thank you for that question, because I personally again think that this is a serious misconception. What is difficult is generally down to the time and effort you put in. So if you take my example, I haven't studied Dzongkha properly as a student. I spent about 25 years out of Bhutan learning other languages. But still, I did a lot of self-study after I came back to Bhutan, and my Dzongkha is pretty good, I would say. So if you give even 20% of the time you give to Dzongkha as you give to, say, foreign language, for instance, English, you give 20% of the time that you give to English to Dzongkha, and you will master Dzongkha in few years' time. This is my take on it. And then people often say Dzongkha is complex, complicated, there are new words being coined, we should simplify. Simplification is not an answer for a national language. Now, if you want to have a rich culture, a rich civilization, a rich Bhutanese thought, you have to have a language that can also communicate that richness and that diversity. You want to simplify language, you're going to lose quite a lot of richness. No one will ask to simplify English. In fact, languages like English is getting richer and more complicated every year. For instance, look at botanical language in English, look at legal language, look at technological language. Now, there's so many things that we don't know, but we don't say it should be simplified because we don't understand it. Now, the names of plants, for instance, how many of us know? The names of the new digital gadgets and tools and things that go into it. So, I think what we should do is, of course, have basic Dzongkha in a very usable form for the general population, but Dzongkha must develop as a language to be very rich and very sophisticated, let's say. If you want to have sophisticated thinking, you need to have a sophisticated language to convey that, convey the nonsense, convey the connotations, the metaphors, the knowledges, the poetry. So you can't expect a language to be a very simple one used for basic conversation. So again, what I think is we need to have a language that is easy to use, certainly, that is accurate. So whatever message we want to convey, we should be able to convey it easily and accurately. And in case of Dzongkha, there's also a need for propriety or appropriateness.
Yes.
I can't use the same term I use for water for myself to talk about water for you, right? We have chu and chap, or the honorific terms. So we need to also communicate appropriately.
Yes.
So I think easily, accurately and appropriately is what we need in terms of language. And simplicity is not going to achieve that.
Yes. That's right. Thank you. Coming back to the standard testing system, I would like to ask Sir Karmanda, who will be the ultimate authority in certifying? Will it be the Ministry of Education, RCC, Election Commission of Bhutan, or the DDC?
Well, we haven't really delved on this, but we have made certain points that we feel that as a language authority, DGC might spearhead this testing system, but nonetheless we will also consult with the relevant stakeholders. For instance, if it's going to be applied in the Royal Civil Service examination, then we will consult with the RCAC. We'll also see what should be the minimum requirement for them to qualify. Then if it's regarding the Election Commission of Bhutan, we'll talk with them, we'll see how we can align our DSTs with what they are using right now. And then in line with that, we'll also we'll talk with different institutions wherever it is applicable, and then see the probability. I cannot really say that DGC will only be the prime agency to spearhead and then implement this, because in order to make this successful, I feel that a joint effort and cooperation is needed.
Yes. Karma sir, when are you going to implement this test?
When it comes to implementation, this is a very drastic, I would say, change at a very policy level, because if we are to replace the existing testing systems, Dzongkha testing system in the country, we have to have policy interventions. For that, we have to do pilot testing. So far, we have carried out the pilot testing with the Royal Institute of Management, and we found that it's quite working. Nowadays, we didn't have much problem, and also we seek feedbacks from the participants, and they were saying that this is indeed very holistic. One thing we forgot to mention is the existing testing systems do not judge your competency in listening and mostly reading. So that's why we feel that this basically caters all of our categories of categories. So we also seek their feedback, and now what we'll do is we'll take this further. Because of the COVID pandemic, we couldn't do more pilot testings. So we'll do in different colleges, and if possible, we'll also do mock tests with the aspiring local leaders, and also in other private entities, and see how it really works. And then after that, we will submit this recommendation, or rather the entire system to the commission and then to take forward and to really institutionalize this system so that everybody will use, which will definitely promote and preserve our language, and also at the same time there will be huge considerable reduction of expenses and human resources.
Yes. I don't have further question, but I would like to seek your final words to our viewers on the standard testing system.
Thank you, Islam. So what we have at the moment, the very strong team who worked with us, we have come up with the testing system that assesses the 4 skills. We have the question set for speaking, listening, reading, writing. There are 10 sample questions already ready.
Yes.
We need to increase the question bank a bit more. We're hoping to at least have 30 question sets in the question bank for the real test when it happens. This testing system, as my colleague Karma pointed out earlier, is not only a way to judge the linguistic competency, but it also can assess people's cognitive abilities, how good they can comprehend the content matter, how good they can analyze a chart or a data set given, how well they can interpret a picture, or how can they read the mood of their author or the speaker, and so forth. So it is actually quite a comprehensive, very well structured test, and I think the Bhutanese offices, institutions should take it up.
Yes.
But then, all said and done, what is important for us to remember is, as we speak, we have about 7,000 plus languages in the world, and every 2 weeks one language dies. It becomes a language that is no longer a living language. We have about 24 languages spoken in the country. A lot of them will be lost, will die eventually, and 21st century, most people think up to 90% of the world's languages may die.
Yes.
Dzongkha, at least, it's the national language. We have to do what we can to save it and make it a living language. And again, languages are not natural phenomena. They're created by men. They're created by people. So they just don't die. We kill them. We let them die. And that's what we should do. And for such thing, for such intervention, it is really up to the political will. We really need a strong political will from the highest offices down to the ordinary citizens to keep national language vibrant and strong. And now, if this kind of testing system is not supported by the institutions and the highest offices, a lot of the work that we have put in, the resources that went into building the system will be wasted.
Yes.
So I think this deserves being tried in some of the big institutions. So I do hope that there will be political ownership, that there will be strong support to institutionalize this, as Karma pointed out.
Yes. I think I'm hopeful that I'm having a full faith, like Doctor said, that there will be a strong support, and I think everybody should support in promoting our national language. With this, I would like to thank thank Doctor and Sir Karma for being on our show and highlighting the importance of the Dzongkha standard testing system. Thank you so much, and it was great to have you on our show. And thank you for watching the program.